your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. The couple who died in a bear attack in Banff National Park last weekend were identified as a couple from Lethbridge. A family member of Doug Inglis and Jenny Goose says after receiving a call from their satellite device, he knew something was immediately wrong. The pair and their dog were on a week-long backpacking trip throughout the area and had been consistently checking in with family along the way. The pair were found dead along with their dog at around 1 in the morning on Saturday. The grizzly bear which attacked the couple was 25 years old and was put down. Lethbridge police are investigating the sexual assault of a 16-year-old high school student. Police say the incident took place Tuesday at Chinook High School, and involved players from the school's football program. The assault took place in the school's locker room after regular hours. Police say the incident was not random. The suspects and victim knew each other. Both the high school and the Lethbridge School Division are fully cooperating in the investigation. Police say there was no risk to other students and the school did remain open for the rest of the week. Some Lethbridge businesses in the downtown area say they're frustrated with the lack of communication from the city regarding construction along the majority of 7th Street and 4th Avenue South, which was heavily impacted their business. Angela Stewart explains.
For several months, frustration has been building as many businesses say they were left in the dark about construction taking place in the area.
I showed up to work one day and there was construction everywhere. I had no idea, no notification that there was going to be construction all over downtown.
Construction on a multifaceted project began in August, which includes water main work, improvements to pavement, and protecting the cycling lanes. Bone says this has impacted those residents who choose to come into the downtown.
It's impacted which way people come into work. It's impacted whether or not people want to travel downtown. John Piska, who owns Big John Books on 7th Street, says sales at his store have gone down significantly since the beginning of construction.
It was 75% down, so that means 25% of what we were usually getting. August is our best month, and this year it was not. It was actually third on the list.
Closures on the block of 4th between 6th and 7th Street will be taking place for the short term, and Piska anticipates more problems for his business.
A lot of the people on 4th are not going to be able to have anyone come to their store. They're going to have to go through the alleys, which are always blocked.
The businesses say they're unsure of when construction will be completed. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
And just an update there, we did reach out to the city and they told BCN they sent the latest project updates to business owners a week ago, which contained timelines, further project background, and info about regular updates. And speaking of Lethbridge businesses, the Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously on Tuesday to draft a report looking into additional incentives to support new and existing businesses here in our city. Mayor Blaine Higgin explains why he brought this motion forward.
If someone came in and said, you know, I want to spend $5 million on a project, we would be able to, it would fit into this category. If you're at a 10 million, but everybody is treated fair and it's very fair and equitable. So for that reason, I wanted to make sure that we got this going so that there's, I said that the actual resolution, I wanted to be called open for business, but obviously we downed it a little bit, but that's kind of what it's all about, is to make sure that we're open for business at all times.
A report will be written up by the city manager for the Economic Standing Policy Committee for consideration later next year. Food banks in Alberta have seen a significant increase in the use of their services over the past couple of years, according to Danielle McIntyre, the executive director of the Interfaith Food Bank. McIntyre spoke about food insecurity issues in Lethbridge at the Southern Alberta Council for Public Affairs, or SACPA, last Thursday. She says locally they've seen about a 30% increase in the number of people who need food, and hopes her presentation encourages more people to get involved to help those most in need.
As we head into the colder winter months, we know that number is going to continue to go up. So it's a really great timing with Thanksgiving this weekend that we're able to encourage people to be grateful for what they have and think about others who might not have as much. Grocery costs are out of hand and more people are in need of food bank services. So I'm here to advocate on behalf of the food bank and encourage people to get involved with us.
Last week, Food Banks Canada released their poverty report card. Almost every province failed. Alberta, meanwhile, received a D grade. We need to take a short break, but on the other side of that break, a Lethbridge MP speaks out about what she calls the online censorship bill. We'll be right back.
People are paying attention, and Canadians are aware that, in fact, their voices are being censored.
Welcome back. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas has spoken out against the Trudeau government's Bill C-11, or as she calls it, the online censorship law. She's taking issue with the fact that the feds will be forcing podcasters to register with the government by November 28th. She's urging Canadians to sign a petition to help protect freedom.
People are paying attention, and Canadians are aware that, in fact, their voices are being censored. A podcast registry. Innovative, hey? Now, when it comes to attacking freedom, this government just can't help itself. They are absolutely committed to censoring what we can see, what we can say, and what we can hear online. Now, why is this government, just curious, so hell-bent on censoring people's freedom of speech?
Mr. Speaker, it's simply false. What the bill doesn't do is regulate users or people that produce podcasts. Exactly. What the bill does is make sure that tech giants pay their fair share, such as Apple, Spotify, Netflix. What it does is support our Canadian creators, and what it does is making sure that Canadian stories are heard and that our creators have a voice online.
The cold and flu season is fast approaching, and with that comes the potential of a strep throat surge in Alberta this fall. According to pharmacists, trends in 2023 saw strep cases hit a 6-year high. The severity of infections also rose with an increase of invasive group A strep, which is a serious condition that can be fatal. You can wash your hands and wear a mask to help prevent the spread of the virus. Loa Manning, a Lethbridge pharmacist, talks about what the common symptoms of the illness are and when you should seek help from a professional.
Strep throat can cause a sore throat, fever, trouble swallowing, sometimes in young children, even nausea and vomiting. Generally, it is not associated with a cough, so that can kind of help people distinguish, is this a cold, a flu, or am I actually getting strep throat? So your tonsils can be red and swollen. Sometimes they have white patches or streaks of pus, but if that's not there, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have strep throat. Fever, headache. If you have a sore throat lasting longer than 48 hours, you can definitely come to the pharmacy. We can do a swab for strep and you get the results in about 15 minutes. Some places do walk-in appointments, some you have to make an appointment, so just call the pharmacy.
Manning says if a swab is positive, the pharmacy will prescribe antibiotics to help get rid of strep. The Alberta government has launched a new dashboard reporting stats related to respiratory illnesses. It will report the information on COVID-19, influenza, and RSV. Information provided will include cases, positivity, hospital admissions, ICU admissions, and deaths. The dashboard is set to be updated every Thursday throughout the respiratory season. Alberta Health Services announced that newly recruited international nurses from 15 countries will be arriving in the province soon. Officials say around 70 RNs will help bolster staff at 30 AHS sites in both central and northern Alberta. Those sites include hospitals, community health centers, and long-term care facilities. About 70 nurses are expected to arrive in the next 6 months as they accept job offers and move through immigration. AHS officials say even more will be arriving over the next 2 years. Well, the Alberta government announced a $330 million investment over the next 5 years to help revitalize downtown Calgary. Government officials say the money will help support the Calgary Rivers District and the Event Centre. Last April, the province, the city, and Calgary Exhibition and Stampede signed a memorandum of understanding to invest in infrastructure to support the new Event Centre, which includes a 1,000-seat downtown arena for amateur hockey.
Alberta's investment in the revitalization of the Rivers District will support public amenities and infrastructure in the district, and that includes a new community rink, improvements to public spaces, and importantly, connections to the entertainment district. Of course, any investment in infrastructure is much more than the dollar figure attached to a project. It's more than a building and it's more than a road. It's an investment in making Alberta the best place to live and work and raise a family.
And in addition, the Calgary Flames are getting their new $800 million arena. It's to be built near the Flames' current home, the iconic Saddle Dome, built in 1983, which will be getting the wrecking ball. Only New York's Madison Square Garden, home of the Rangers, is technically older among NHL arenas. However, the Garden underwent a massive renovation and modernization a decade ago. The new stadium is expected to open around 2027. Alberta's Royal Tyrrell Museum has a new dino. It's a 2-meter-long skull of a triceratops that was found in 2014 south of Calgary. The museum says its staff members spent more than 6,500 hours preparing the fossil for a display. It's believed to be one of the best preserved and most complete triceratops skulls found in Canada. Wow. Up next, is your privacy being compromised? Well, our next guest says so. More on the other side of the break. Digital ID and digital currency seems likely to become the norm in developed countries in the near future. Some love the convenience this brings, but there are some very real privacy concerns around this technology. Now, world governments are keen on using it. But why? Sharon Polsky is the president of Privacy and Access Council of Canada. She joined Naveen Day to discuss the pros and the cons of digital ID and currency. Take a look.
G20 nations made a decision to work towards implementing the use of global digital ID and digital currency. Why are these governments so keen on this, and what are the benefits?
Well, really, it's like with every new technology. Digital ID, centrally controlled digital currency, they're technologies that offer benefits and risks. But whether something's a benefit or a risk, and to whom, is something that's a matter of perspective. So consumers, we all benefit already from the convenience that comes with being able to use digital transactions. Your Apple Wallet, sending money by PayPal or Interac, it's everywhere. And we've gotten very used to relying on those conveniences. Credit cards, it's everywhere. And it's so common that people rely on digital to make their purchases that about 7% of Canadians no longer carry cash. That has that's a problem, though, because if more people stop using cash, it's easy to spin that as saying nobody uses cash, nobody needs cash, we don't need to have cash, and move it to digital. It's a way of justifying it. It's a problem, though, and we'll talk about that. And digital isn't just a convenience for you and me. Companies benefit from using the digital tech, and they've enticed consumers to sign up for things like loyalty programs that track what we buy. So merchants can sell and profit from that information. So It fuels an economy based on surveillance. And let's not forget the third leg of this equation is government. They benefit hugely from digital activity. And they're, on one hand, eager to increase international trade, and having single uniform digital currency would eliminate a lot of red tape. We also look at digital identities being touted as essential for everything from avoiding fraud and protecting children, of course, but it also means sharing very sensitive information, typically providing a copy of your government-issued photo ID to some company somewhere in the world that, like every company and government, promises to safeguard our information, and they apologize when it's been breached. So we're being told, don't worry, we'll protect it, this is the way it has to be, as if it's a foregone conclusion, an inevitability, and there's no point even questioning it. And it's got some serious ramifications.
I assume that these G20 nations are promising to put protections in place to safeguard against government abuse, but realistically, can citizens really trust these safeguards?
We've been told for decades now, trust us, we have protections in place, we have logical, physical, and administrative protections to protect your information. But when you look behind the curtain, it's like the Great Wizard of Oz, the protections sometimes, often, aren't there. And that's why we've seen everything from governments across Canada last week, to the Pentagon, to NASA, to every major corporation and government getting hit with cyber problems. So for all the assurances, technology is not perfect yet. It's created by imperfect people. It's not tested adequately before it's launched. That's why there's the patches that are released so frequently to fix the problems that are built into systems. So I'm reluctant to be as trusting as we're told we're supposed to be able to be.
Sharon, some of our viewers do want to take action to make a difference in these kinds of matters when it comes to digital ID, digital currencies, artificial intelligence. What are some things that these people can practically do to either prevent the implementation of digital ID and currency or to protect themselves as much as possible from compromising their privacy?
First of all, use cash. It's as simple as that. The other thing is tell our lawmakers at every single level of government what we want and what you don't want. Talk to your local riding association. We're coming into a federal election sooner than later. There's municipal and by-elections. Tell your riding association that digital ID, digital currency, and privacy are important to you. Make it an election issue.
Next, how realistic is the federal government's 2035 target of net zero emissions? Some say not at all. We dive into that after the break. Well, the federal government has a series of policies related to making Canada a net zero emitter of carbon by the year 2035. But a Leger poll shows those policies are not very popular. Also not crazy about the idea is Alberta's United Conservative Party government. I recently spoke with Rebecca Schultz of the UCP, who says the 2035 goal is simply unrealistic. So you were talking about the federal government's net zero 2035 plan there, right? So that's that goal of 100% net zero emitting electricity system that's in 12 years is kind of what that goal is. So now, Rebecca, you were one of the very first ones to jump on this and hold a press conference to announce that Alberta will not be taking part in this plan and that the province has its own plan. So do you want to maybe dive into that a little bit more? Do you think this 2035 deadline is unrealistic?
It is. It's completely unrealistic. It's also unconstitutional for the federal government to dictate to provinces how we meet our own goals and how we develop our resources and how we generate our power. But it's also completely unaffordable. So I've already spoken to that. Like, our concern here is that, I mean, we're here to represent Albertans. Reliability and affordability of our electricity is absolutely top of mind at a time when cost of living and inflation are the top issues for not only Albertans, but Canadians. How can we justify this exceptional cost, when we have a plan around carbon neutrality to get there by 2050 here in Alberta? We have our own plan, and that was released by my former colleague, Minister Sonia Savage, and the Premier just this past spring, saying, look, we care about the environment. We know we can reduce emissions without crippling our economy and driving away jobs. And so we're going to do this in our own way. What we're asking the federal government for is to have a reasonable, common sense discussion about this. The Premier has set up some working groups between the province and the federal government to address these issues. But I think it's frustrating then, as we're working to get these discussions rolling, that we see this first draft of the clean electricity regulations, which doesn't take into account any feedback that we in our province, whether that be government or much of the feedback from industry, has provided. So that's obviously exceptionally problematic, but we're going to continue to stand up for common sense and essentially, make sure that affordability and reliability are kept top of mind, no matter what.
Okay, so you're mentioning the provincial government had that 2050 goal. Was that a goal you already had set in mind before the federal government announced this 2035 goal?
You know, our industries have long said that, they've been doing exceptional work in reducing emissions. And so industry is doing this for a variety of reasons, investment, competitiveness. And so for us, it was about capturing, okay, what's happening here already? Have we articulated what's going on? And then recognizing that there are a lot of different ways that we can reduce emissions in a variety of industries, not just in our energy industry. Last week we were out at a cement plant with Heidelberg looking at their net zero cement pilot project, which is pretty exciting. So there are a lot of different ways that we can work to reduce emissions. A goal of 2050 is very reasonable. It's aligned with a number of other jurisdictions around the world. And, I just don't think that we can move to this 2035 arbitrary target with these massive costs to Albertans and Canadians, and especially when the reliability of our system is at risk. So, we'll start those conversations with the federal government, but, we really have to defend affordability and reliability for Albertans.
Okay, now the Alberta government has long fought back legally against federal rules that it doesn't like, and you've also passed the Sovereignty Act. So is there any way that we could see this act come into play here in regards to this net zero emissions?
The first thing Premier has said is, look, we're going to sit at the table and we're going to have these discussions. We need to talk through, and it's not just the clean electricity regulations that are problematic from the federal government. They have also publicly said that they are going to put an oil and gas cap and an emissions cap in place for our energy industry, which would essentially impact production. And again, that's an area of provincial jurisdiction that would have a huge impact on jobs, our economy, on entire municipalities and First Nations communities. That's also not something that we will accept. So those are the types of things that we're going to be discussing with the federal government.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with an entertaining discussion about growing up in a legendary author's home. Welcome back. If you grew up in Canada and studied Canadian literature in school, you might just remember the legendary author W.O. Mitchell. His novels like Jake and the Kid and Who Has Seen the Wind have contributed to the Canadian literary landscape. I had the opportunity to speak with his son, who has not only followed in his father's literary footsteps, but has also adapted W.O. Mitchell's biography into a play. Here's part of my interview with Ormond Mitchell, where we delve into the world of this remarkable play and gain insights into what it was like growing up with such a prominent literary figure. You're here to delve into the world of this remarkable play and gain insights into what it was like growing up with such a prominent literary figure. Welcome, Ormond, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
So, Ormond, can you maybe start off by telling us about the inspiration behind your play called Magic Lies and what audiences can expect from it at the premiere? I guess it already premiered, didn't it?
Yes, it did on Friday. That's right. Great opening. The guy who plays it is wonderful. The way it started was the last book that my father did was An Evening with W.O. Mitchell. And it was a collection of 31 pieces. My wife and I selected and edited them, worked with him on it, and wrote little intros to each one. And when that came out in 1997, a couple of drama stage people came to us and they wanted to adapt it and do a one-man show and recreate An Evening with W.O. Mitchell in the tradition, for example, of Mark Twain Tonight. And so that's where it got its start, and its finish was at Rosebud with a wonderful opening.
How long does it run at Rosebud through October, right?
It's run from now until October the 21st. There was 31 productions.
Excellent. Okay. And Rosebud Theatre, of course, is so cute, and it's kind of nestled in that little corner of Alberta there. And I think that's the only place it is playing right now, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so your father, W.O. Mitchell, was a renowned Canadian author. So how has his legacy influenced your own creative pursuits, including this play?
Well, he had a major influence on my life. Not an overpowering and smothering one. He was a wonderful teacher. And in fact, he considered himself throughout his life a teacher. He taught in high schools in his early career, and then he taught creative writing programs all over Canada. And he had a major impact on my aesthetic likes and dislikes. I went on to be a university professor and teach English literature. And on a number of courses, I taught some of his books, in fact. So he had a pretty profound impact on me.
W.O. Mitchell is celebrated for his distinctive Canadian voice in literature. So how do you think that his works have contributed to the Canadian literary landscape?
Well, it's really interesting. I think he was the first, if not the first, to put Saskatchewan prairie, to put Canadian prairie and Alberta foothills on the literary map.
Wow.
In fact, when Jake and the Kid, the collection of short stories, came out in 1961, Margaret Lawrence wrote a review, and she was a very excited review about he's writing about us. And she made the point that there were actually gophers in some of these stories, and there were details of the Canadian landscape. And she said, he gave us license to write about ourselves. And I think that was true.
Well, okay, so Who Has Seen the Wind, one of his most famous novels. Are there other notable literary works that have maybe had an impact on Canadian literature and culture?
Yes, I think there are. I think his top three, the novels that will go on, are Who Has Seen the Wind, which has now sold well over 1 million copies just in Canada alone. The other one is a kind of a bookend one. It's called How I Spent My Summer Holidays. And it's almost as if the character Brian, young Brian in Who's Seen the Wind, grew up. He's now an adolescent. And it's a slightly darker book, but it's a very powerful book. And then the other one is The Vanishing Point. And The Vanishing Point is particularly relevant today because it is about his experience. It's built on his experience with the Stoney Nakoda at the Eden Valley Reserve. He taught out there for a year in the early 50s, and he wrote this novel about red and white relationships.
Up next, everyone seems to be feeling the pinch these days as it's costing more just to get by. After the break, we discuss Canada's rising cost of living. We'll be right back.